Gemara. This is Friday's Gemara. Daf Samach Vov Amid Aleph. Says the Mishnah, right in the middle of the page. Misha Haya Mushlech Levar. Someone was tossed into a pit. But Amar, and he said, Kol Hashemeas Koila. Anybody who hears my voice, Yichter get Ishta Sharai, get to my wife. But he didn't say give it to my wife. But obviously he's a bit delirious, and therefore had Elu Yichtu and Yitnu. It's as if he gave instructions also to give it to his wife as well. Says the Gemara, why do you think that it's a human? Maybe some kind of a demon. And Tejra explains, we're only worried about demon if it's out in the countryside, not in the city. You saw the form of a person. The Shadim also take on the form of Adam. The Chazal Lebabua saw that it had a shadow. Demons also have shadows. The Chazal Lebabua, the Bua. You have a large shadow, and then you have a smaller shadow of that. It explains that it's makifim and makifim. The makifim, the shadim only have an access to makifim. Because makifim doesn't make a difference whether if you're a worthy recipient, but the makifim of makifim you do, so therefore they're not capable of connecting to it. The dilma inu nami islahu. Maybe how do we know? You know what a shed has. Maybe those have a shadow of a shadow. My son taught me, or others say it's supposed to be Yonis and Shida. And Yonis and a demon told me the bu islahu, less. So they don't have shadows of shadows. So how do you know it's not one of her co-wives that are pretending to be her husband? Somehow or another she put on a masculine voice, and she's just trying to just ruin her life. So to be small, b'shas hasakana, when there's a time of sakana, koisvin, you write the noistin, and you give afa pisha emakin, even though you don't recognize. Big mistake the shaynim. Do you still have to see the form or not? Do you still have to see the form? Because we said before that every demon. You have to see some of the form of a person to make sure that whatever it looks more like a person, and so on. Or we have to do any investigations at all. Time of sakana, just do what you have to do. Next Mishnah, following Mishnah. How about if a healthy person said, right, to get to my wife, but he did not say give it, then don't go ahead and give it. He stopped taunting her. There's a story of a healthy person. He said, you're right to get to my wife. And then he went to the top of the roof, the Nafal. And he threw himself off and basically died. Either he committed suicide. So, Omar Ashbach said this. Ima Atzmanafal, he fell on his own, knows he committed suicide. How they get it's a get. That's how most people learn. Im Haruach, if it was as an accent, no, but if he jumped off, that when he said 2 hours ago, right to get for my wife, and you wrote it and you gave it to her, she didn't give it to her too late already. You gave it to her, then he meant it. He knew this is part of his plan. But Im Haruach, if it was an accident, then before when he said, just right to get to my wife, he had no right to give it, and if he gave it, it's meaningless. Ain't no get, it's not a get. The Tosfos he learns that means that it turned out to be that he was sick and he was weak. So when he went on the roof, he fell down because he just couldn't stand anymore. He fell down. Not that he tossed himself off for committing suicide. But bottom line is, it wasn't some accident. It was something he recognized in his own terminology, mortality.
That he's going to throw himself off the roof.
No.
Does that take? So he knows he's about to die. Does that take on the gather of a shchina of the?
No, because you have to be sick. This is a tzava machas meis, if anything. But even then, it's interesting. Is that called tzava machas meis or mitzvah kind of a mess? He was a perfectly healthy person, and then he decided to throw himself off. I guess so. It's
tzava. The person. How does he know that the guy is going to do that?
He has no idea. So it's only if he did write it and he gave it. If they didn't give it to the woman yet, it's not talking about it. Exactly. Says the Gemara, you bring a story that discredits your point. The Gemara, missing word that's what I should learn. If from his actions you can see at the end that initially he meant it, he wasn't just mucking around. How did he get? Umaisanami is a story, but a healthy person, Amra said, Kiss you get these, you're right to get to my wife. But all the Rashagag, you went to the top of the roof, the enough of the mace. So Zanaya, that if it was Rashbag, Ima, after enough of it, a get. In other words, if he knew that this is going to happen, then it's a retrospective to get. Ima Ruach doch so ain't a get. Who got was a person, old Kish, went to shul, Maki, Nuki, a teacher, Bede, and his son, the Yossi was sitting there, the Yossi, there's another a third person sitting there as well. Amalu, he said to them, two of you, I want you to get to my wife. L'saiv shachiv maki nuka. And this guy went on a trip, right? He said, I'm going overseas, I want you to get to my wife and give it to her. But the teacher died. What's the shayla? Still two Adim remaining. He said, two out of you guys. The question is as follows: Me masha inish bro shlicha b'makam abba. The father, but the teacher was there, and it was a son. When you said, "I want you to be Adim," did you even consider the son, or you thought out of covet you meant the father, not the son at all? So you never appointed the son to be a shliach. Nobody's going to appoint the son to be a shliach in the place of the father. Papi said, yes, a person will appoint the son to be shliach in He said 2 out of 3, any of the 3 could be candidates, and father died, the son now can become the shliach. Next Mishnah. Now, this is the concept we learned of Chavtest, idea of mili loy memser l'shliach, which is if I appoint a shliach, we said you can have 100 shluchim. I give a get, he can pass on to the next, because there's something here of substance that is being passed on from person to person. But if I just gave him mili words, does that give enough power in the world of words that the shliach can appoint someone else or not? And we had a machlekes there. How to learn. So this Gemara is going to follow Rabbi Yasi, who says that mili loy memser l'shliach, the words is not powerful enough for the shliach to transfer to the next. So what happened? Amar l'shnaim, he told 2 Adim to get the ishti. I want you to give a get to my wife. Now, how are they going to give a get if you never gave him a get in the first place? So obviously, they have to write it as well. So other l'shleisha, or even if he told 3 people, but what he told the 3 people? Kiss would get for Tnulish. I want you to write the get and then give it to my wife. Do they have the right to pass? Now, 3 people like a bezin. Maybe he appointed them to be a bezin. A bezin can also can appoint shluchim. They themselves must do it. Either why? Because he told them clearly, he said, you should write the get. He didn't say to them just to give. If he would have told the bezin, give the get to my wife, it's a different story. But he told the kiss it through. I want you to write it and I want you to give it. And they have nobody that cannot pass it on. If he told 3 people, true get lishti. If he told 3 people, give the get to my wife, he didn't tell them to write it, but there's no get here. So obviously it has to be written. So I want you to facilitate that. So they have a right to tell others the yichtavu. They have a right to pass on to others because as if he appointed them because they're a bezin. He told them to give what? So obviously he pointed them to be a bezin and facilitate this whole thing. When they also bezin, those are the words of Meir. This halacha. Shalom Aleichem. This halacha was brought from Rabbi Chanina. He came from jail. Remember, Rabbi Akiva was incarcerated, and Rabbi Akiva was teaching Torah while he was there. Even though the only reason why he was in jail in the first place was because he was a 7-day Torah and promulgating Torah, and he continued doing so in Tfisa. And remember, he did Bakir Shachay and all that. So Rabbi Chanina came from the jail, and he passed it on the name of Rabbi Akiva. I have a tradition. If a person told 3 people, not if he would have told 3 people, I want you to write and give a get to my wife. Obviously, he's telling them that you are the only ones who can write. But because he only told them to get lishti, I want you to give a get to my wife. That they should tell others the yichtu. Then these people are like a bezin, and they have a right to instruct others to write the get. And so on. Why? But next to us and bezin. So Rabbi Akiva sides with Rabbi Meir according to Rabbi Chanina's Ish Oina's version. However, Rabbi Yisrael said, I disagree. I think Rabbi Akiva holds differently. We actually told the shliach. Our tradition from Rabbi Akiva is even if he instructed the largest bezin in Shalim to get the Ishtin, told him, give a get to my wife. He didn't tell them to write. Just don't give it. It doesn't matter. Because therefore, since words cannot be transferred from one shliach to the next word, what he wants them is to write the get as well. They don't know how to. They're not sefer. They have to learn now how to become a sefer. The yichtu, they should write the get. The yichtu should give it because words cannot be passed on from one shliach to the next. Okay, then the next part of the Mishnah we learned a long time ago, and Machlek is the Rechish Lakish. Amal Asadi, he told 10 people, Kisu with get lishi. I want you to write and give a get to my wife. Echad Kaisev, if there were 10 people in the room, but he said, I want you guys, all he needs is 2 Adim and 1 Sefer. Echad Kaisev is 9 Chaisman. 2 people sign and 1 person writes. But if he used the word Kulchem, so Echad Kaisev, Kul Chaisman, then they all have to sign. But we had a Machlekes was they're all the Adim or 2 of the Adim and the rest are part of the tonight. Therefore, he messed Echad member 1 out of the 10 dies. How do you get bottles? He can never meet his criteria. He wanted all 10 Kulchem to be involved in the get. Says the Gemara, after Rab passed away, see the Shiva of Rab sent a letter to Shmuel, Yelamdeinu Rabbeinu, teach us, Rebbe, what happens if Omar Lishnayim, you told two people, Kisfu, write, the Tnu get lishti, I want you to write and give a get to my wife. In the case of our Mishnah, all it says is Tnu get lishti, give a get to my wife. So he said that even though he didn't tell them to write, what he meant was that they should write. In this case, he told them clearly, write. He told these two people, write and give a get to my wife. And the Omru l'Sefer, but they didn't know how to write. So what they did was they asked the Sefer to write it on their behalf, and then the Kasav and the Chasmuhain, they signed. What would it then be in this case here? What would it be? Shalachlu, he sent back to them an answer, and he said his response was, Tate, if she got married based on this get, she has to go out because it might not be a kosher get, because the shliach has to follow the instructions of the mishalech. Could perhaps they didn't really follow the instruction of shliach to the letter. Although those are Talmud, but you still have to look into this. You don't have it that often, but Shmuel is saying they still have to further analyze the situation. What's bothering him? The guy told it's even more explicit than our Mishnah. He said to them clearly, "Kisvu not just through get lishti, where we pass in our Mishnah that they have to write it. He told them, "Kisvu through, you write it and you give it." And yet Shmuel says maybe it's a good get when they instructed the Sefer. How does that work? Elema is the word here, because it's words. He didn't give them a get, he just gave them instructions. And instructions may be in the shaila whether you can pass on instructions or not. Can you pass on to the next person? Shmuel clearly passed on that words cannot be passed on to the next person. Cannot be passed on to the next person. But what's Chal Shaila then? Then, of course, if he told them to write, what's a shaila whether he construct a sefer? El Shmuel Hakam Boiler. This is what's bothering Shmuel. The word writing. What does writing mean? Does writing mean write the get, or writing means write your signatures? He's talking to the Eidim and he says, Kisru, you should write. Write what? What Eidim normally do, which is signatures, or the get itself. Hai Ksoiv, Iksav Yodon, Iksav Haget. What did he mean when he said write? Did he mean write the get? The write the get itself? The contents of the get, or he meant that they should sign. Now, what does it help if he told them to write the get itself? He just said mili lamem shliach. Or what's it help if he told them just to sign, and they for what? He told them to sign, and that's why they had a right to instruct a sefer to write the get, because they're not in any way breaching the instructions of the mashalech. But the problem still exists. How can you pass the words on to the next person? How can they instruct a sefer? What do we gain? We'll see in a minute. Said he said to people, to get lishti. He didn't say right. He said, give a get to my wife. But 3 people, he said, kiss the get, the lishti. To 3 people, he said, write the get and give it to my wife. And we're saying that these 3 people are Eidim, not a Bezdin. They should write and give. So it's clearly yichtu, they have to write. What's Shmuel Shaila? Says that goof is Shmuel Shaila. What did the Mishnah mean when it said Hadeilu yichtavu? Does it mean that they should just sign their names, but they cannot pass on to somebody else to sign? But the writing of the get, that the Mishnah name is discussing that. Of course, you can hire a sefer. Somebody knows. Is that what the Mishnah means? He goof become a baile. Ksav yodenu. Does it mean that no? Ksav yodenu means their signature. Ksav hagetu. What does the Mishnah mean? That's what Shmuel is says. Adayin tzara Talmud. Adayin tzarachin. You see all these people after 25 pages of a tshuva, then they finish up Adayin tzarachin. Same thing here. But meanwhile, he paskined Teitze. She has to leave her husband, which is a very strong, usually sometimes we say, nisas, you got married already, let them stay. Here we say Teitze. Says the Gemara, I don't understand the shayla. Shita the ksava get to. Surely we're talking about the get itself. Let's look at the Mishnah. How from the context of the Mishnah. Tell you safer, doesn't safer. What did Rabbi Yossi say? Noiminu l'shliach. We told the shliach Rab Chanina from Oinoi, who came and told us the name of Rabbi Akiva, what he thought the din should be. That even if we instruct 30 people like our mayor, we don't treat them as a bezin. We say that they have to write it. Af onam we have a tradition. I feel amal bezin agod mishleim. Shnu get liishti. Even if he told the great bezin mishleim, so you can argue he definitely wanted them. He conferred upon them the status of a bezin, and he wanted them to expedite his wife's get. Sheyumadu v'yichtavu v'yitinla. It says there in the Mishnah, if they don't know how to write, they have to learn how to write. Now, what do you mean? Which dayan doesn't know how to sign this thing? What do you have to learn? Obviously, you don't want to learn Safras. So it's clear from the Mishnah. What are we talking about over here? When it says yichtavu, we're talking about writing the contents of the get. Said the Gemara.
So he says to the business, means somebody from the business, not the whole business.
It's like even if he told the entire bezin, so you can argue when he's told the entire bezin, what he definitely meant was your bezin.
Yeah.
Just point whoever it is.
Each of the business.
No. One of the members of the bezin after it. Yeah. Second about if you tell me you're talking about Safra is writing the get itself shop, I understand. That just because you're dying doesn't mean you're a sefer. Even though we learned in Chulun the criteria of a Talmud Chacham is all these different things. Writing is one of them. But if you're going to tell me that it means that signature is how could it be a dying that know how to sign? These three that you don't have to know 70 languages. They have to be so literate. And
remember, once we had a crisis that the Amoraim don't know their students.
The Gemara said that. We had definitely tested in Baba Kama. We had cases in Babasa that said Amoraim Biki Bekroy. Generally.
So
we're saying Avodah Zarah in the Gemara itself about that. Anyway, think about
I'm just saying you can't make assumptions.
Yeah, but not writing, you would think that they're all literate. Says the Gemara. Yeah, why not? If they're a new bezin, hard to picture a dayan.
How do you put it?
Yeah, his own name. You have to write 3 X's or something. What do you have to do? The Gemara, a new one. The East Vidalon, the hike so now we're asking a question. What do we gain from all this? Okay, let's say the Mishnah is saying you only instructed them to sign the name. Okay. And you didn't instruct them that they have to be writing the get, so they can pass on somebody else. But it's mili. Forget the wording of the Mishaleach, but how do the Shluchim have the capacity to pass on these instructions to somebody else? Because if each even you want to hold the hikes of who he meant that that they should just sign the names, and that's why they can instruct a sefer, but get kosher, but the writing of the get can be done by somebody else. He just established before Rabbi Yasi holds that words cannot be passed on to another shliach, so he couldn't pass it on. Amri, we say like this: Sav Haget, and if he only instructed them when he said kisvu, he meant signatures. But so what about the rest of the get? You need a get. Obviously, what he meant was he implied, but the rest of the get somebody else. It's as if he gave them clear instructions to hire somebody else. And there's an opinion that says that Omer Imru, if I told you do something and you pass it on somebody else, you don't have a koyach. Who gave you that koyach? But if the Mishalech empowered you, the Mishalech said to the Shalech, go instruct somebody to do the following, even though it's in the realm of Mili, it's a much stronger force of Mili because I empowered you. On your own, you don't have the koyach, but I gave it to you. So therefore, if he told them just sign, what about the rest of the get? Obviously, he's telling them, it's implied, the rest of the get, find a cipher to do it. So therefore, it's like he said, Imru, tell somebody else. So the Gemara, my answers, if you hold it, that then by telling them sign, what he's really telling them is, but find somebody else to write the get. And even the same Rabbi Yasi who says that meaning means but Imru will agree. Says the Gemara. You make a little chiddush now. The same Rabbi Yasi holds, but if you gave him instructions to pass on the instructions, somebody else, it's all right. Well, let me ask you a question. But now we learned. We will learn. Ksav Sefer Ve'ed. We had in places stuff. Ksav Sefer Ve'ed. What happens if this is the Mishnah says the Sefer wrote and there's a single aid on it? Kosher. You only have 1 aid. You need 2 aid. So even though the Mishnah uses the word ksav, so that the sefer wrote, ksav here means the signed. Chasam sefer shanim, that the sefer signed. So in other words, you have 2 eidim in the sefer and the aid. What's the chiddush in the sefer signed? The sefer signed. This Mishnah must accord with Rabbi Yasi, and why? Because how do we know? There's a problem. If we allow a sefer to sign and someone has to give instructions, what happened to the person who went to give instructions to the sefer is embarrassed to tell the sefer, I don't trust you to be an aid. We're just using your talents, but I'm going to get to, because it's considered a respect and honor to have someone be an aid. I mean, trust them, they have integrity, they're a kosher person. So if the person who was assigned to go find the sefer and anything else and aid him, asked others to become Eidim and not the Sefer, so to be affronted by it. So sometimes you'll deviate from the instructions of the Mashalech, and you're going to ask the Sefer to be an Eid, even though the Mashalech never did. And if he did that, they get this puzzle. Who gave the Sefer the right to be an Eid? So we wouldn't allow that. When do we allow to be the Sefer to be Eid? Only according to Rabbi Yossi. But Rabbi Yossi says that middle of the Shliach. So the only person who could have told the Eidim to be Eidim is the Balabas himself, the husband himself. So if we see a Sefer signing, it must be, no mistakes can happen. It must be that the husband asked the Sefer personally, go ahead and sign. So only according to Rabbi Yossi can we allow the signature of the Sefer. Says the Gemara. Who's the author of this mission? Only could be Rabbi Yossi. But he says, only because words can be a shliach. Therefore, we avoid any problems. Because if a Sefer signs, it must be not because the Eidim are embarrassed, the shliach is embarrassed, because the balabas. The husband told him. Now the question is, and if you think Moide Rabbi Yossi, but if you tell me there are exceptions, even Rabbi Yossi's Moide, that Imru, so why can't it be that Rabbi Yossi mistakes will happen? The shliach was told by the husband, go find me a Sefer, and you instruct him, so and then find me Eidim and instruct them, and then the shliach will feel embarrassed. Or even you be the agent. The shliach is embarrassed to tell the sefer he doesn't trust you as an aid. He just wants you to be a sefer, so he will change the instructions. If you hold the controversy, there are exceptions that we're going to allow sometimes that the husband doesn't have to be there. Then the shliach can be put in a predicament that he might be embarrassed and he will change the instructions. So the same problem. What do we gain by saying it's Rabbi Yossi? Rabbi Yossi, a whole churba will come out of this. The Zinin Damalu L'Shnayim will tell two people, Imru La Sefer, tell the Sefer, the Yichtav and right. Well, plenty of Yichtav, I want you to find those two other agents sign them, because I'm saying you could do that. But Mishum Kisufa, the Sefer, out of shame, embarrassment for the Sefer, we're worried, he'll ask the Sefer to be an aid. So you didn't gain anything. Even Rabbi Yossi was still worried. The husband never said that. So as a result of that, the star gets apostolate. So how can we allow the Sefer to sign even Rabbi Yossi? Says the Gemara, Kivan the Amamah, because we learned kosher that imru is kosher, but it's not encouraged at all. This kind of behavior, because mistakes can happen. All that. If it does happen, it's not common. And we already had a number of times this Masechta that things were milsal shkicha legazabu rabban. Hopefully, he's excited, right? But worried that maybe I have a shame. But since it doesn't happen very often, that the husband will give instruction to a shliach to find me a sefer. Usually the husband goes directly to the sefer. So therefore, so according to Basi, it could work. We'll trust that if the sefer signed, probably the husband instructed the sefer directly to sign. Why aren't we worried? Today, maybe he told two people, Imru the sefer, tell the sefer, maybe he gave them direct instructions, tell the sefer to write. And then he said, the atem chasumu, and you sign. So you two sign and get someone a sefer. I know you guys don't have the skills to write. And why? Because in this case, he's much more clear. The first case, he said, find me Eidim, find me a sefer. So we say, kosher v'leisasa. Let's have kedus. We don't want that. But here is much more specific. You guys sign just a sefer higher. And that, there's an machlekes if kosher v'leisasa or kosher v'tasa. Nothing wrong with that. Kosher v'tasa. So we're asking a question. Of course, it wasn't kosher v'tasa, which means it must be the normal way of doing things. He tells two people, be Eidim and find me a sefer. No, why aren't we worried that the problems will arise? Says the Gemara, the same problem. Out of shame of the sefer, they'll change the instructions and say, no, what you be the Eidim, and only one of them will sign, because out of shame, back to why you tell me according to Rabbi Yossi, everything is all right. It's not all right. We should have the same concern. The husband never said that's where they get this puzzle. We hold that it's kosher, but you shouldn't do it again. So therefore, since even in this case, we were much more expressly told. You told the Eidim, be the Eidim, nevertheless, don't do it. The one says kosher, but don't do it. The one who says do Ma'ikl Meimer. Elig says you're right. Rabbi Yossi Tarti Yamar. Rabbi Yossi says two dinim. He says the both possible. He says that three people, they're always or a bezin in Yerushalayim. If you give them instruction through Kisru, they're not a bezin, and they have to learn how to write it themselves. They have to learn to write. Even if he told them Kisru through, they have to learn to write themselves. and also he holds that Imru is a problem. But Ushmuel Sovla Kavasa Bechada. He does not. He agrees that immediately Lemeshliach, but he does not agree with Rabbi Yossi, who says that Imru. Remember, Chasam Seifa can only work if you follow Rabbi Yossi, and that under no circumstance can you actually have those kosher leisasa. Shmuel says I hold kosher, but I disagree with him. Therefore, I say that if he gave instructions clearly pass on, then you're allowed to. Not like Rabbi Yossi. Stop over here. Have a good day, everybody.